Welcome to State of the Hack. I'm Christopher Glyer.
And I'm Nick Carr.
And we're here with Nate Warfield here at DerbyCon and from the Microsoft Security Response Center. So welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And so we thought it'd be interesting to talk to Nate. So actually, why don't you walk the audience kind of through your role and what you do, and actually the role of MSRC.
Yeah, so MSRC is, like I said, Microsoft Security Response Center. We are the main point of intake for all vulnerability reports coming into Microsoft. My specific role in there is I handle most of the stuff that comes in for Windows. So I like to say you may remember me from such hits as MS-1710, WannaCry, NotPetya, Spectre Meltdown, BlueKeep, DejaBlue. All of those ones are.
Do you remember them by like numbers, or do you find the like term like BlueKeep or other ones like that helpful?
I actually think the names are kind of funny. The running joke that we have is it's not actually a vuln until it has a flashy name and a logo, or a website, or all three. But yeah, so that's what I do is mostly work with security researchers. They'll send us vulnerability reports. Either sometimes it's like Project Zero will send us stuff because they're Project Zero. Some people will be looking for bounty. We work with governments that send in, weaponized ODAs and nation-state type attacks, and then I just sort of herd the cats, make sure that everything gets fixed on schedule. If there's issues with reproduction of what they sent us, then we go back and forth with them. So the workflow is kind of like a support ticket, but much more at stake, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, do you want to do a little bit of just your background?
Oh, yeah. So
people like to hear how you got into it.
So, yeah, I have an interesting way of getting into InfoSec. I started hacking in networks when I was about 12. I was hacking BBSs over dial-up. I was homeschooled and grew up in Hawaii, so I didn't have a lot of friends. I was very nerdy and computery, and being a homeschool kid, that was my outlet, was finding other things to do. So yeah, got a little bit of trouble war dialing around the island of Oahu because it's all full of military bases. Didn't have any DoD folks show up to kick in my door. So yeah, I was sort of a little troublemaking hacker kid, desyncing undernet, pirating software. Got in some trouble at school for that, and then. When I moved to Washington about 20 years ago, I started just going into network engineering. I was like, I was really good at getting into networks and doing sort of bad things to them. And I was like, what, I don't want to go to jail. I'm going to just do this professionally. So I spent most of my career just doing network engineering and then dabbling in sort of gray hattish things on the side. And then about 5 years ago, I decided, what, I'm just going to go do InfoSec full time. In the last 3.5 years, I've been in MSRC. So yeah, it's fun. I like to stay doing most of my research is like cloud security, network security, looking at like holistic problems of woeful configurations, mass scale attacks. I was tracking down like NoSQL ransomware a couple years ago. It's an interesting threat space because I've got 2 million and change IPs that are Microsoft's that are open to the internet at any given time. So I like to say it's not a needle in a haystack, because that's an easy thing to find. You just use a magnet. But you want to find one like gray needle in a pile of black needles. That's a much harder problem. So I like these big data problems. I'm kind of a data nerd.
I like how I like some of the data you've shared that you've been collecting, I guess, over like 3 years. Some of the trends you've shown on like the attack surface.
Yep.
I feel like you're trying to highlight some stuff you see as a big issue. You want to walk people through some.
Yeah. So I have a database, a couple of databases that I set up that I track open port data across the entire internet. Actually, the whole internet, and then I subdivide it out into the US, UK, Russia, China, India, and then 5 of the major clouds. So Azure, Amazon, Tencent Cloud, Rackspace, and a couple others. So I just pull this data every day out of Shodan, and I dump it in a database so that I can look and say, okay, like, is anything getting better? Is anything getting worse?
Yeah. What's the answer?
It's always getting worse. Like, if I could have one thing to tell you people, is stop plugging everything into the internet.
You start your day off like this? Because
day's
starting, having coffee, things are getting worse.
Yep. It started out with, when I started looking at this NoSQL attack campaign that was like 2.5 years ago, I had never really even heard of NoSQL, right? All of a sudden I saw this, some like Security Weekly or somebody said, hey, MongoDBs are getting popped. And I was like, what the heck is MongoDB? So then I started digging around, and I then went through, I ended up just going to Wikipedia, looking at all the NoSQL solutions, and then looking them up in Shodan and watching them all getting hit at the same time. So in the back of my head, I was like, what? I want to start looking at all of this. I want to see if there's another sort of open source flavor of the month server product that's, like if I see a big uptick in popularity, I'm going to be like, oh, what's that? Maybe we should be looking at why this is open to the internet, right? Because we all know NoSQL shouldn't be open to the internet. It is, and it still is. And I went around the world last year trying to tell people stop doing it, and they're still doing it. But yeah, so that's that. I really wish I could say things are getting better.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time I go on a Showdown safari, I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, even recently I pulled down like 20,000 MongoDB like open systems, just dumped it out and started looking through the database names. And there's credit card information. There's I didn't connect and pull them out, but I'm just like, dude.
Yeah, when we got calls from people, I took a couple of calls inbounds for incident response, and it would be like their MongoDB was ransacked, and they're holding it ransom. They were doing like the ransom, but then people didn't want to disclose that the data was taken. I was like, you have to look at how this works. They took it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's...
Well, what's interesting about at least, maybe they've done a new campaign, but back in 2017, they weren't even taking the data. They were just, because I actually went in and looked, I connected to one system and started looking through the logs, and they basically just went in, they went, drop database.
Yeah.
And then they created another database with the same name and a ransom note. I'm like, you guys didn't do any, like, this isn't, like, if you pay this, like, you're not getting any data back.
Lazy, like some of the ransomware where it's like fake notes and it's not even encrypting the files, but it's like they change a file extension so like it won't open by default or like things like that. Like
I think it's the same actor that sends me these. I keep getting these emails about how they found me while I was on a porn site, and they're going to tell all my friends about it. I'm like, oh, all right, okay. The best is sometimes they send it to one of our security lists at Microsoft. It's full of like some of the top hackers that Microsoft has, and I'll see this email come in. I'm like, you have no idea who you're talking to right now. So
what? How's that RDP data looking like? The attack surface for RDP.
The attack surface for RDP is really bad right now. And I was putting on Twitter a couple weeks ago. The thing that I'm most concerned about is I think people are going to get complacent because BlueKeep came out, right, and everybody was like, oh, it's the end of the world. It's going to turn into a worm. MSRC, we put a blog post out, which we don't generally do, saying, hey, this is really bad. Yep. And so I think everybody got excited, and they're like, oh, and then nothing happened. So then with DejaBlue, what they're calling the last two RDP vulns we fixed in August, my concern is that people are going to be like, yeah, whatever, the sky's not falling, Microsoft. You said it was going to be a worm last time. It didn't happen. We're just going to ignore it because those two vulnerabilities are far, far more dangerous because they affect every single version of Windows, right? BlueKeep, I think, was just Windows 7 and down. Yeah. But the DejaBlue pair, the CVEs 1182 and 1181, those are everything.
And so do we have any, I guess comparing the three, do we have any ideas or thoughts as to why maybe they weren't weaponized, or like is it that it was that much harder to accomplish, or
more broadly weaponized, I guess?
Yeah, well, one of our everybody's favorite pen testing tool company just dropped the BlueKeep exploit on Friday onto the internet. That was nice. My theory why it's not being weaponized, I'm positive that someone has built POC for it, but this is too nice of a vuln. Like, you're not going to waste this with another WannaCry, right? Like, this is the type of thing that you'll be able to use for years. Like, probably 10 years from now, people are still going to get popped with this vulnerability because it's just, it's Windows, it's RDP, it's always on. Granted, you can turn NLA on or just leave it on, which is on by default. A lot of people don't do it.
What version is it on by default?
Windows 8.1 and up. I believe NLA is on by default. But we know a lot of people turn it off because it can be annoying. There's some weird app compat things, I think, with like some of the non-Windows RDP clients, like if you're using like an RDP client for Linux or something. I think there's some weird issues that cause people to turn it off. But just turning that on will keep you safe.
Got it.
The fact of the matter is that they didn't, or the team that found it was one inside of Microsoft. They weren't looking for non-NLA vulns. So they found this, they were like, oh, that's really, really bad. They were actually looking more for vulns with NLA enabled. So the scary thing is the attack surface of NLA disabled vulns is probably still pretty big. And as we know, people got really, the time it took for people to figure out BlueKeep was quite extensive. I was talking with, I won't name him, a researcher in the UK that had pretty much figured out the DejaBlue he figured out where the vuln was in about 12 hours after he was looking at it. So I'm sure anybody with like an actual, somebody with a whole team of people, they've got it.
It's an interesting case study because I've been sort of impressed at people's handling of exploits. The number of people that have been able to get a working exploit for the BlueKeep stuff and then haven't released it, but like you said, then maybe the community hasn't responded by patching because there wasn't a big wormed one. Some people joked about maybe worming up something that actually used it and then enabled.
I'm joking that I've had that conversation.
It wouldn't be too bad if. wouldn't be legal, but if someone wants to do it, I mean.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on whether that's a good idea. I will say that I had a conversation with someone at US CERT years ago. We should just build a worm that goes and it secures everybody's little Soho routers and all their like IoT garbage. I was like, we should just let that out and fix the entire internet in like a weekend. And he's like, yeah, except he's like, but you'll go to jail. And I'm like, all right, that's fair.
So what's it like on the inside of MSRC? Like, what's the process when you guys get either a vulnerability report or somebody claiming that they found something they think, I don't know if they, do you guys confirm it? Do you, like, what's the process working with the researcher or whomever is the organization that's reporting it?
Yeah, so they'll send it in. It gets turned. We do like a basic just initial triage. There we get a lot of garbage. Honestly, there'll have people being like, I've seen, my favorite one was somebody in Asia said that they had a 0-day for me, and then I looked at it and they're like, well, you get this piece of you run this Python code on your Windows machine and it formats your C drive. And I'm like, well, let's see, Python's not native, you need to be admin, and this is not a 0-day. So some stuff like that, we don't even waste anybody's time with.
RM-RF just wiped my system, I don't know why.
Yeah, right? But no, so it'll come in and we have a whole engineering team that will actually do the reproduction work. So most people will send us actual like source code, right? So HTML files, C++, sometimes they'll send us a compiled binary. But it's depending on like some things like a JavaScript bug is pretty easy for them to reproduce. For things like Hyper-V, which are much more complex, or Kerberos or any of these things, they might have to build up a lab. So we have an engineering team that their job is just to reproduce the vulnerability. Once it's confirmed, then the process actually starts of getting it patched. So then bugs get created for the Windows team or whichever team owns it, and then they start looking at, okay, when are we going to get this fixed?
And how long does it usually take from, and I'm sure there's probably a broad spectrum, but are we talking like minutes or hours to confirm it, or is it generally more like days or weeks?
It depends. I think our team, we try to get it done within a day or two.
Okay.
But we obviously get quite a few vulnerability reports, and resources of humans are finite. So yeah, it depending on also what it is, right? With some things like Hyper-V, obviously Microsoft has this little tiny cloud that might run on Hyper-V, so we have a vested interest in reproducing those things quickly.
Yep.
But yeah, it's usually a matter of days. It doesn't take weeks unless it's something that's really, really complex. Or requires there's some esoteric areas of Windows that even our engineering team don't deal with much, so they may have to pull in like the developers from Windows to have them help them take a look, because it's like we don't see vulns in that area. There's a few researchers that their forte is sort of finding the pieces of Windows that most people forgot were even there, and then they find a vulnerability in it.
So you go through the process, you confirm it, and then how hard is it often to get that, especially if something's being actively exploited in the wild, to get something turned around and either included in a Patch Tuesday release or out of band? Is that?
There's always a risk assessment made, right? So we look at in instances of like nation state or like active exploitation, we'll usually look at, say if something showed up today, which is the 7th of September. We got like what 3-4 days until Patch Tuesday. Yeah. That's not going to make Patch Tuesday, right? There's not enough time to rebuild all of the patches for Windows and go through testing. So that may be something where they would do an out of band. It also, depending on what the risk level is, like sometimes if it's like, it's only affects like Internet Explorer 6 or something. Like if it's some weird off thing, it doesn't affect all platforms. The decision may be like, okay, hey, you know what? There's not a huge risk. Maybe we'll push this to the next Patch Tuesday. Most of the time, though, when it's being actively exploited, we try to get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I remember there's been a couple of campaigns. So APT3 was always one of my favorites, where almost like clockwork, they'd have a 0-day.
Didn't you find one of those 0 days? Yeah,
I did find the forensic art. Well, I was doing analysis in 2014. So FireEye talked about Operation Clandestine Wolf and Clandestine Fox. I think Fox was the first one. But yeah, ABT3 would send a spear phishing attack with a link in it. And so I was doing analysis and found the forensic artifacts that we were able to then put together that actually then had the exploit. But from a vendor perspective, so we'd work with Microsoft, pass them reproduce it ourselves, and pass it to Microsoft, and then. But meanwhile, APT3 is hitting like multiple different companies, like with new rounds of a phishing attack like every day. I think especially in like the clandestine wolf attacks, there'd be like 20 new customers or clients of ours that would get targeted. So there's definitely like, it can be high pressure to get it patched quickly, but I imagine it's pretty complicated in terms of all the regression testing, and like you're trying to get something out fast, but you don't want to there's always that. Like I said, the risk assessment is exactly that. With hundreds of millions, billions of Windows machines out there, we can't say, okay, if we even 3 companies, that's a big deal, but if we fix 3 companies and break 700 million other people's computers, the fallout will not be great, right? But we also, what we look at too with active exploit, well, with most things, we look to see if there's anything we can do to mitigate it, right? If it's being actively exploited and maybe it's a complex fix, we would say, hey, you can turn off like Windows scripting host, for example, or maybe disable this thing, and that'll neuter the attack until we can get the patch out. And then it's with the active exploitation is always interesting because we try to sort of adhere to the whole coordinated vulnerability disclosure thing. We ask researchers to not disclose once they've told us about it. But when companies come to us and say, hey, like FireEye says, hey, we found a thing being exploited, we are not going to say, okay, well, don't talk about it. We'll be like, hey, maybe don't post the POC online, but we understand if you're going to warn your customers and say, hey, FireEye, that's your business. So we're very flexible. We understand, like, we're all sort of in this together. We're all trying to defend people. So that's we spend a lot of effort trying to make sure that we get it done quickly and safely, without breaking everyone. Right, which is a tough balance to do day in, day out. Yeah, it's a tightrope for sure. Yeah, it'd be interesting to me now, kind of working a little bit on the software side, like seeing the processes you guys have to actually be able to do that and know, like, what am I going to impact and not. Like, I can only imagine what the level of automation and other testing that goes into that. But. Yeah, well, it's definitely it comes down to like really what components of Windows too. Like, so most of the 0 days that I've seen have been like browser-based things, right? Because that's your average thing. A phishing email, you click a link, you're popped. But some of the stuff, like Will Schroeder and Lee Christensen talked about the Kerberos Active Directory Forest thing. That was one where we looked at it and we're like, yeah, this is actually a really bad vulnerability, but we can't just like ship a patch and risk bricking everybody's Active Directory machines, right? And it was interesting because they highlighted this, hey, Microsoft did a really good job of this, which was sort of, I liked it as a compliment, but when you think about it, it wasn't that we were doing so much a really good job as we were doing it very, very carefully because we wanted to give customers the time, like if for some reason they had a weird dependency on this, this domain trust, they could opt out, right? We didn't want to ship a Patch Tuesday thing and just break everything. So those types of fixes take a little bit longer. Yeah, with a browser fix, the regression risk is almost null, right? You can say, okay, yeah, this is just a VB script like vulnerability, or it's a Chakra JavaScript array like overflow problem. Those are quick. Very little, like, they just know it's easy to fix and not going to break anyone. I see. I lost my train of thought.
All good, man. So are you guys, it's pretty interesting. I feel like we all have a similar pace to work. So you get in, you said you're an early guy,
right? Yeah,
like,
I'm an early guy.
And after seeing that the internet is getting worse, showing your data, then it just sounds like you've handled a lot of the really interesting escalations that come in.
I get a few.
Any of them that like stand out to you? There's any events that?
Okay, so I think I know what you're hinting at. What about those shadow brokers?
Well, no, we don't have to get into that.
No, that's fine. I mean, that one to me was one of the more interesting ones. There's a lot of backstory between obviously how Microsoft got tipped off about it. Probably can't go into details on that. But yeah, it was one of those things where I think it was the summer of 2016. They start posting this thing. They drop this file out there. They start dropping I think it was the Vault 7 leak. Or no, was it Vault 7? There was one that they did. It was a bunch of, I think, router and other exploits, and I was like, okay, these guys aren't joking. These guys are actually legit. These aren't just a bunch of script kiddies. Yeah. But then I had the other GPG, the big tar file, sitting on a VM just waiting, and I was like, I ran a brute forcer against it for like 2 weeks trying to brute force the password, like never got it. So I was like, these guys are maybe they're just faking us out. And then so I get in the office, super early because it helps me. We have a UK arm, so I can actually talk to the guys in the UK when I'm there instead of like sending them an email when they're at home. So I get in and I see this. The first thing I see on one of my feeds is like shadow brokers dropped the password. I'm like, oh boy. So I'm like, so I pop it in, thing decrypts. I open it up. I'm just like, it was like ring the bells. Like, guys, you all need to get in here like now. Yeah. Because we knew about the SMB thing, we didn't know what else was in this file, right? So then I started looking. So it was basically, pretty much my whole team stopped doing everything else for that entire day, from like 5:30, 6 in the morning until I think folks were there till like about 10 at night. We split up into teams. So we had our engineering guys were actually looking at all of the exploit stuff. They were launching the exploits against VMs, watching they're ripping apart packet captures, watching what's going on, saying, hey, but it was interesting because at first the internet was like, Microsoft is so screwed. Like all these O days just came out, right? And so we weren't really even watching that. So what I was doing was working over all the post-exploitation modules and saying like, what are all these things doing, cataloging it all out. So it was fun because we had a big chat thing going of like people checking in on different work streams, and so the guys are like, hey, the SharePoint thing, yep, we already fixed it. And they're like, hey, this Microsoft Exchange vuln, oh yep, we already fixed that too. And hey, the SMB thing, yep, we got that too. So it was sort of this like, it was a huge problem at first, and then we were like dig, and by the end of the day we realized we fixed all of these. Like there wasn't a single O day, if you were fully patched, there wasn't a single O day left in there, right? They were all fixed. And it was fun to watch the internet kind of turn around. I think it was Kevin Beaumont was saying, he's like, man, Microsoft, these are all fixed. Like everybody was sort of like, whoa, like you don't hear like good job Microsoft a whole lot, which
good job Microsoft.
Yeah, you're welcome. But that was interesting. And then of course, we were like, where we patch, right? And then people started lobbing the Eternal Blue exploit around, right? And so. At the time, so we were like, okay, we fixed them all. At least the patches are out, but as we know, not everybody patches on Patch Tuesday. So I jokingly say like it's like sometimes script kiddies are like giving an AK-47 to a chimpanzee, right? They're like just shooting it everywhere and launching. They were using the implant too. So what the problem was is I couldn't see that in Shodan, right?
Right.
So I was like I pulled out all of like the Azure IPs, like 14,000 machines that had SMB open, scanning them all by hand, like with a script from NCC Group, I think. And just to see like, okay, how much of this how many people have been hit in Azure that haven't patched, or how many people are getting implanted? And there was like 50 machines that had the implant. And I was like, that's 50 out of 14,000 is not too bad, like, right? Maybe everybody got fixed, everybody's patched, we're all good, go home. And then, of course, a month later, WannaCry comes out, which was, I come in. It was like that spring and summer of 2017 was interesting because it's like every morning I'd come in and I'd be like, all right, I wonder what's going to happen. And I started fearing Fridays, right? Because Friday was when the Shadow Brokers dropped the O days. Friday was when WannaCry hit. I think it was Friday in May. So I was watching this like, okay, hey, look, April 12th. Or 14th, they drop all this stuff. I'm like, okay, that was a busy day, So a month later, I go in the office and I'm like, there's stuff getting shut down all over the UK. I'm like, what is going on? And so it's, ring the bells again.
So like, I feel like, dropping exploits creates work for a lot of people. These are real humans. If we're learning it creates work for everyone. I feel like we're not going to convince people to stop that behavior. Maybe do it on a Monday.
Yeah,
let's start small.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or maybe don't do it when everybody's at a hacker conference.
I look at our weekly, or speaking of WannaCry, I look at our weekly stats on our endpoint security product, and at week in, week out, still to this day, WannaCry is like the number one highest alert, by volume. Just because when a system gets hit, it then tries to spread automatically. So it's
one of the things that I worry about. It doesn't keep me up at night because I have children to do that. But the thing that in the back of my mind freaks me out is that if that kill switch domain ever gets shut down, right? If whoever's hosting it, what happens if the hosting provider goes offline? What happens if just something breaks? What if someone?
Well, I think but going back to trying to relive it, I think they tried to DDoS.
Yeah, they did.
The site to try and get it go down, and
there was a really good talk from I forget the other guy's name. It wasn't Marcus, but it was one of his peers at Cryptos. He did a talk, I think, at B-Sides Manchester this year, and was talking about how the boots on the ground as they were reversing WannaCry and finding the domain, and basically this 2 or 3 day long fighting of they set the domain up and then immediately were getting DDoSed,
right.
And I think they're running it behind Cloudflare or something now just to try.
Yeah, I think they had to move it over to Akamai or Cloudflare or something.
But it's one of those things where I've heard some statistics that there's still hundreds of thousands of machines, if not millions of machines that still have it. But they just haven't propagated it because the domain's there. And I'm like, dude, if that domain ever goes away, it's like you got this sleeping cancer that's just waiting to come back and become malignant again.
Yeah, I guarantee 5-10 years from now, there will still be WannaCry, worms trying to go. I mean, it was kind of like SQL Slammer back in the day when multiple years after it was, or named Code Redder and those other, older worms. were out for a long time, and but this one, I don't know. This
Yeah.
one's gonna be here for a long time.
It's going to be here for a long time. And I was talking to someone earlier this week, and I was like, yeah, one of the things you should know, one of the signs when you know it's a bad vuln, when we release an XP patch.
Yeah.
Because we don't usually if you have XP,
Yeah.
normally people will pay for extra support for
Right.
XP if they need it. But when we just give one away for free, that should be a clue of this is probably pretty bad if we're giving away an XP patch.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, thanks for being on.
Yeah,
It's
thanks for
awesome
having
to
me.
finally meet you in person, too.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
All right. Cheers.